Howdy, folks. Happy Thursday. Again, screwy weather in Buffalo. It was 45 degrees yesterday, melted all the snow, and now it's snowing again.
Oh, so, really? You have no, we have like really warm rain. It's 59 and raining.
Yes. We're going to start right into the show, and Eck will be joining us in a few minutes to talk about the Edmonton situation and some rumors that he has heard leading after the dismissal of Chiarelli. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, January 24th, 2019.
I'm Cassier in minus 38 Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Michael Lagello, and we're pleased to be joined by Eklund, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Hey, Eck.
Hey, how you guys doing? Does it sound okay?
Yeah, it sounds okay, and we're live. We'll just go right into what you wanted to talk about to start the show. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me bring up my notes. I appreciate it. So I'm at the. I appreciate you guys jumping on real quick. So yeah, the Edmonton thing yesterday. I wish I could talk about it more. In the podcast, but following.
It's breaking up.
Yep.
Try logging off.
Let me try log. Yeah, I'll be right back. Okay. I'll be right back.
All right, just to touch on it because he'll come back. There is some rumors coming out of Edmonton after the dismissal of Chiarelli, and the interesting thing, Russ, is that we talked about yesterday. Keith Gretzky is the interim GM, and the fact that when Bob Nicholson made his statement yesterday to the media, he essentially said that Keith Gretzky does not have autonomy to make decisions, that it'll be part of a group. And when we know one thing about usually how groups work when it comes to trades and transactions, it's disastrous usually.
Yeah, it's going to be so difficult for them to navigate trades and other things. They're going to need to figure things out way ahead of time, because on trade deadline day, you can't have a lot of voices, and because other GMs don't want to wait, and you can miss out on players that way.
And Peter, I brought this example up yesterday. It's like, I remember it was about a month before the trade deadline in Toronto. I think it was 07.
Right.
No, 08. It was 08 when they fired John Ferguson Jr. and they brought in Cliff Fletcher. And Fletcher's job was to, start to pare down that roster, get as much as they could, and get the no trade players, the Muskoka Five, to waive their no trade clauses. He failed on that in that instance, and he did get some draft picks for some players like Hal Gill and Chad Kilger, but he never, he was never able to really accomplish things because it was only a month. It was only a month that he had to really establish things. Russ, you got to mute yourself.
I know, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Sorry. So Peter, I think it's a tough task for Keith Gretzky to really, and that organization, to sort of come in the 11th hour and be able to do that.
Yeah, you know what? We just got Eck back, so let's let him get in on his stuff because he's on a tight timeline. But I've got some thoughts on that, Mike, about that approach.
Okay, go ahead, Eck.
All right, so hopefully this is better.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Okay, so the interesting thing here is the Chiarelli dynamic that went on in Boston, and now it's going on in Edmonton, where Chiarelli tends to be his own island. And a lot of people I always kind of blamed Sweeney and a bunch of the other group of people in Boston. I always thought Chiarelli kind of got a bad rap there. And this is, of course, the second time this has happened, so that's kind of interesting. And it makes you wonder if there's more to it, like if this is something just of his dynamic. I've always known Chiarelli to be not the greatest in tough situations. I mentioned that before. Like he's not one of the ones. He tends to panic is a strong word, but but panic is a word that that's used with him quite often. So to me, that's something you have to look for. And I think what happened here was that basically you have Nicholson and Hitchcock, who are a very strong duo, who worked together before, who are who have a very good sense of where they want to go with it. And I think it really came down to that they had their idea. And one of the big ideas that I've been hearing is moving Puljujarvi for Parayko. and there's more involved in it. But that's something that's one of the big trades that they would like to make. Hitch wants to make. Hitch also wants to move Talbot to Philly for a defenseman, and that would be a younger defenseman. Now Talbot kind of fits the Flyers what they'd like to do, I think, pretty well. I mean, as far as it brings in a guy who can be a solid, 1A, which he's done before, and be the one for now while we still bring in Hart, and that's something that I think that. So and also the other thing that they're doing as well is they're also talking to the Rangers now about Zuccarello. So there's another player that Hitch wants to bring in. So I think what you're seeing here is basically what happened. And it's interesting how we had the press conference the day before we were on the air here. We talked about how there was, I said there was something else they wanted to say, but they didn't say it. They had that sudden, they canceled, they had a team meeting and they had a press conference. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, this, I think what was going on is that they thought this was going to happen a day before then it did for whatever reason. Go ahead.
Well, I have to say, I can just get the other guys to touch on this. Bob Nicholson is lucky that he didn't have a lie detector attached to his arm and a light, because the light would have given sunburn to most of the reporters at that press conference. Because I mean, him basically saying that. I mean, the stuff in the water comment was ridiculous. The fact that this is a good team with a lot of assets is a joke, because this team has been built the wrong way. They're dysfunctional. They just don't work. Now maybe you can blame that on Chiarelli. And the other thing that was ridiculous, and Peter, you can comment on this, is the supposed lack of influence of the alumni like Gretzky, Lowe, and McTavish. Yeah. Everybody in their right mind has been basically saying that those guys have a lot of influence on Cates and that they meddle in the hockey operations of that team. And to come out and say that they don't is just patently absurd.
But I don't think, Mike, Edmonton is smart fans. I don't think they bought half of what they were told. I think they were just happy with the result.
Sure.
As far as Talbot to Philly, honestly, all they're going to be able to garner for Talbot would be Andrew McDonald and a pick and some sort of conditional third, based on the fact if they're able to sign him, if they even want to sign him.
And why would they want $5.5 million of Andrew?
No, but I'm just saying they won't be able to get much better than that. It's not like Talbot's going to be worth a lot. You got to remember, Talbot was offered around to the league earlier this year, and nobody bid on it. So the value is not really high there. The Zuccarello thing, sure, I could see that happening. And again, I would ask for Benson if I were the Rangers, and I would do that straight up. I'd have no problem with it because I think Zuccarello could come back over the summer anyhow. Yeah. So Edmonton, look, if they think this is going to right the ship, I think we learned a long time ago when teams have a press conference and they're clearly bad and they say it's a good team, then they're not headed in the right direction. But they still could make the playoffs. It is possible.
Go ahead. And they're really trying to. I mean, and the other thing I'll let Peter talk to too is along those lines, Yamamoto, who was sent down to the minors, but just for conditioning and just to keep playing, basically. And he'll be back up. Hitchcock thinks he's an NHL player now. And I've been told that. And that was a difference that they had a little bit with Chiarelli there, that he wants him to be an NHL player. And if not for the Oilers, for somebody else. It is possible Yamamoto could be moved by the deadline as well. They are definitely going to give him and PRV. They're both going to play a lot for Edmonton between now and the deadline to see where they're at, to see if they're going to keep him or they're going to move him. And one or the other is going to happen.
That'd be a good thing, but go ahead.
Yeah. So, given what you've just said, I think there's some stuff here that needs to be unpacked from a process and a big picture look. If Bob Nicholson's listening to Ken Hitchcock, you better make sure that Ken Hitchcock is there next year, because if you want to make these roster moves, he can't be coming back in April at the end of this and going, nah, I think I'm okay now.
Right.
This reeks of what happened in Vancouver after when they brought in Mike Keenan and they gave him control of the personnel, and then they brought in Burke after, brought Burke back to Vancouver, and then boom, Keenan was gone and Burke started undoing stuff. It doesn't work. So if you let Hitch have short-term player personnel influence or control, you better make sure he's going to be there for a while, and
Yeah.
you better make sure that your next GM wants to play Hitchcock hockey. I don't think it's a good move to be reacting based on what Ken Hitchcock wants now,
Right.
because you don't know who your GM is going to be. And frankly, if I'm the Edmonton Oilers, I need someone who is not in the old boys club, who sits between the GM and the Kate's old boys club, who sits there.
Yeah.
You need your Brendan Shanahan.
Right.
It's hard to do that. I mean, in this organization, we've talked about, it's not a matter of, it's a matter of, I'm a little different on what he said as far as Nicholson goes. There's two different things here. Yes, the old guard is still around, and they're still a part of this. They're still getting briefed on everything for sure. But whether or not they're really a big part of the decision making or not, I'm not positive on that one yet. I have to get more information on that. There's definitely a culture there where everybody is being told everything. I don't know who is making the decisions, though, ultimately.
The one thing, again, that was sort of laughable about the comments that Nicholson made yesterday is that he said, well, Ken Hitchcock is just the coach. He doesn't have any input in hockey operations. I mean,
right.
Don't pee on me and tell me it's raining, please.
I think the way he doesn't make the call for trades, and he doesn't sign off on things. But if you don't think Ken Hitchcock is involved, you're crazy.
Right.
When he was in Philly, he wasn't the general manager either, but he had a lot to say in what happened here. Like there were a lot of players. There were a lot of players that got moved out. Jeff Carter, and then
Sharp.
Yeah, and being the veteran and respected coach that he is, he should have some sort of say so.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta have. But you do. Your coach has to be able to tell you what he wants. I mean, on the ice. I mean, that you have to trust that. And I think you're right. I think Hitch will get another year. I think that will be one of the first things you see happen here. I think that then they have to do that to get stability in here. There's no question about it. That's a huge.
But
huge deal.
One thing about the Puljujarvi, Parayko, Edmonton, St. Louis rumor. If that does go down, I could see one player definitely being part of this deal, and that's Patrick Maroon being thrown back to Edmonton, because they haven't had a winger that has played well with McDavid other than Draisaitl since Maroon left. So that could be part of the deal, but it's going to have to be a lot more than Puljujarvi. I mean, the stock on him right now. I mean, granted, he has not been developed well in Edmonton, but for a Parayko who's locked up for 3 more years at over $5 million, I mean, they're going to have to get a lot more than.
I totally agree. They're going to have to give up. I mean, their first round draft pick could be in play in this, very easily. I think they could move their first round pick. I would actually be surprised if they didn't move their first round pick. I'm going to say that much for something that they're doing here. Like it might be Stone. It might be Stone that they go out and get.
Right.
And
it all depends on who doesn't get signed by Ottawa.
Yeah.
Right. And that is the big
for
thing.
them to keep Stone, though. They have to dump salary. They don't have the space to give him the $7 to $8 million he's going to get.
Yeah, not as of now. I mean, it depends on who else they can move out or how they can play.
Well, if they move out Talbot, it helps a little.
Yeah.
But
but that money, you just swap the money for Koskinen.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing I heard, I don't know if this was mentioned at all, but one of the there were a couple big moves that Chiarelli made. Obviously, that were part of his demise.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Hall one. Beyond doubt. That's a really obvious one. But the other one that really was talked about a lot internally was the passing on DeBrincat in the draft. And that was a big, at number 31. They had the 31st pick that year. The Oilers had an extra pick. I guess it was 31st. Or no, that was 30. No, sorry.
Isn't that where they took? Isn't that where they took Benson? I think that's
where they took Benson. But that is not Chiarelli's decision only. That's like a table decision. And so now we're getting into the area where now that Peter Chiarelli's gone, they're probably going to make other changes too.
Bro, what you're going to find out now from Edmonton is that when the apocalypse comes in a couple of years, it's the fault of Peter Chiarelli. everything that has been wrong with this
no, they'll
organization
blame.
during his tenure is going to be the fault of Peter Chiarelli. He is now going to be the scapegoat, and everybody in Edmonton will eat it up like it's Christmas dinner because they believe he's a disaster. And maybe he was, but there's a lot of blame to go around in that organization. And there's still I think one of the things that'll definitely happen this summer is you're going to see Lucic bought out of that contract. It's going to be $1.5 million cap hit for 8 years, but they'll want to get past it.
Yeah, they have to do that. And you're right. I mean, the difference with Chiarelli is, remember, like everybody who's there is really like an Edmonton person. Like, I mean, even Hitchcock, who grew up, who's an Edmonton guy, he lives in Edmonton. He's only coaching there because he wants to coach in his hometown, basically.
Well, the funny thing is, and Peter, this is a joke, because the name that popped up, because everybody in looking at this situation said you need somebody strong to come in there and be able to sort of tune out the Edmonton, the alumni, the Gretzkys and the Lows and the McTavishes, and the name that everybody came up with was Steve Yzerman. Why in the hell would Steve Yzerman take that job?
Yeah. He's not.
Actually, the name that I've heard is Hextall. And Hextall.
Being a Prairie boy, it might make sense, right?
Yeah.
And Hextall has shown the ability to absolutely ignore everybody around him.
but so take your comments about Chiarelli being on his own little island, what we've heard and learned about Hextall, and then it makes sense with what Bob Nicholson said about communication and such, and opening doors to better communication. Now, I sort of put a thing out yesterday about that, or maybe it was this morning, I can't remember. Just tweeting about it and some random thoughts. And that's, I understand what Bob's saying, but that's not the cause of why this happened. The result of what this team isn't because Peter Chiarelli wasn't talking to people. It was your process of how you've allowed this to happen and what you let someone do. So I went on a bit of a thread yesterday, and if you're the Edmonton Oilers, I think this is a 2, maybe 3 stage change, and it's going to be really hard because they don't have assets right now. They actually have liabilities, and all the liabilities are the contracts that you have to pay out. You have to take away the idea that there's a player attached to them for a minute, and you have to think really cold-hearted. They need someone who's like a corporate raider, a person who comes in and strips down distressed assets. And has no emotional attachment to it to get to the point that you can then rebuild.
You're right, Peter, but Katz doesn't want that.
I understand. I understand that. But they need that. Then they need someone who knows how to build.
Right. Well, see, and
2 different skill sets.
And that's the problem.
I mean, he's not going to go for that. That's the only problem.
That's the problem. The thing is that 2 of the better candidates that they listed as potential GMs were Hextall and Mike Fuda and maybe Kelly McCrimmon. All of them have the ability to build a team, to recognize talent, to draft, to do all that. The problem is that they have a window with McDavid that they have to win, I'd say, within a couple years, or that guy is going to get pissed off and say, "Get me the hell out of here."
You know what? This mess is so dire that I don't think you can't rule out trading Connor McDavid, to tell you the honest truth. I don't think
they won't do it.
And it's for all the wrong. And this is why you need to take emotion out of it. You need to take and I recognize what I'm asking and suggesting is a very foreign concept to a lot of hockey owners who have made a ton of money. And this is something they have an emotional attachment to because it's their thing. And particularly with Cates, where he's bringing in these heroes that he saw growing up and everything.
Yeah,
I get it. But this is your moment of sobriety. This is like when an alcoholic wakes up and says, "I've got to change. I've got it." This is your moment of clarity, and he needs to see that what he's done is an absolute mess through and through.
Well,
and every time he sees a way to fix the mess, he's bringing in another layer of problems. And that's all he's created. This is like an onion, and they're going to keep peeling it back. And maybe Peter Chiarelli was in that onion, but he's not the bottom layer of it. He's not the core. They got to keep peeling this back and strip it away. And that's why you need someone who can do that. I mean, if you were going to bring someone in like could really strip it down and make changes and be cold, I think you bring in a person along the lines of Mike Gillis. And it's no different than the idea of bringing a coach, and when you've got a young roster who knows how to manage young kids, but when you want to win, you bring in Laviolette. You bring in someone like that, right?
And that's what they're going to look for, Peter. We know that.
Yeah. And to that point, Peter, I think, not to center everything on Toronto, but I think the only way that Edmonton can unbury themselves from this complete cluster is to go the way the Leafs did with Shanahan and then with Lou and Mark Hunter and Dubas, and that is, find your Alberta version of Robidas Island and put some of these guys and bury them on long-term injury and say, you're never playing for us. If you want your money, you're going to get it. No, don't worry. But there are contracts out there that they have to either buy out or get rid of or trade and take short-term money back or something of that, because they have to clear out this roster. Keep the good young guys, keep the nurses, keep the Clefbaums, Draisaitl, McDavid, keep the core group, but you have to surround them with young talent or with veteran talent that will help them out. And right now you've got about 12 passengers on that complete disaster of a team.
The problem with that team is, other than some players and not many, nobody is there long term. Nobody.
Right.
Everybody is. This team gets treated like the Ford Motor Company every couple of years when it goes bankrupt, and that's the way they're sort of doing it. And if I were a fan, I would be looking for long-term stability. Right now, you don't have that in your coach because he's probably going to go one more year.
Right.
And you don't know who the GM is. You don't know how long Bob Nicholson will stay there. He's an older guy. Where is the stability other than Daryl Katz has a lot of money?
Guys, I got to get going. Real quick, but I wanted to throw one thing out there quickly before I go, and agree with all of what you're saying. The issue, though, is that they aren't there yet as far as thinking that they are a rebuilding team.
Right.
Talking to people there, they really feel as if they are a team that's a few key players away. And that's where their head is right now. They think that because they remember a couple of years ago they went in the playoffs. They have they believe in their young players. I mean, they did the right kind of thing with the Alex Chason, which is we talked about before they even got him, and because that's the kind of player that that would have ended up on the Vegas Knights. Like we talked about, like that would have been. They've got to find those players that are out there. The players that are going to before those players end up on Seattle, and use those as their complementary players, like they did with Chason. They're out there. They're definitely out there. Players who, if they're given more responsibility, will be better players. They exist. And they aren't going to tear it down. They're going. I mean, right now, as of now, at least, they're not. That's not their plan at all. Their plan now is to continue to build from where they are because they feel like they have a solid foundation. Whether or not you want to believe it or not, I'm just saying that's where they are.
I think they'll come to the realization, because we've got a month until the deadline, that if they're 6 or 7 points out of a playoff spot, then instead of adding to that group, unless it's something that helps them going forward for years, it's going to be sell off the Alex Chasons and sell off some of the guys that they can and start the unburying of that roster. So.
I mean, I think they'll extend Chason, honestly, but I think there will be players. I think there will be players they sell off. But I do have to go, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hey, all the best.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, just to continue that analogy, Russ, and we'll move on from this. Mm-hmm. But if the Edmonton Oilers are the Ford Motor Company, then some of the guys on their rosters, some of the guys on their roster are Ford Pintos waiting to get hit from behind and explode.
Well, here's the one other thing, and I've been pushing for this, and this is the perfect team for it. I mean, how many Russian players do they have on their roster? What's the answer? Zero. You can go over there now and sign a few players. There's some pretty good players that you can go over there and sign at a low cost and bring them here and insert them after the break if you really wanted to.
It's going to be a really tough sell for the organization that hung Nail Yakupov out to
whatever.
dry.
You know what? That has nothing to do with it. Again.
I mean, if they're willing to pay money, sure, but you know what I'm saying.
But you know what? I mean, that's right now. I would be if I were in charge. I would have every scout scouring Finland, scouring Sweden,
Yeah.
scouring Russia, and I would bring a couple of bodies back before the season starts back up again.
Russ, I agree. They need to go, excuse me, scour places no one is looking.
Correct.
Find some gem in the Swiss league. I mean, anything.
Yeah.
Like they need, and you know what? Like, man, I'm looking at them on the cap, and it is so ugly. It is just so ugly.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that's why you bring these guys, you move the other guys, and you hope that jolt does something. Because honestly, what Eck is talking about is right. Those guys are out there, and you have to find them.
Sure.
They don't have enough time for that to find those guys because there are GMs protecting those guys. These other guys, they can be signed. They can come over after their season's over. Some of them can get out of their contracts now. Some of them have played in the NHL.
Yeah, like Patrick Berglund.
Yeah.
Like a Patrick Berglund.
They're at that point where that's what they need to do if they really want to keep this going. But again, when you say they're a good team in the press conference, they're not a good team. Because if they were a good team, you wouldn't be doing any of this.
And, that is just living in complete and utter denial. And I understand Nicholson going out and saying, we're not going to give up some of our young assets for quick fixes. Okay. But again, don't tell me that, because I know everybody knows it was out there in the week or two before the firing of Chiarelli that they were willing to maybe shop Puljujarvi, shop their first round pick for help. I think if they're maintaining that they're one or two players away, they're still going to do that. They're just trying to get, more of a return.
They have to shed salary. They have to shed contracts and salary. There is like them trading Puljujarvi for Periaco. Like right now, they've got, according to Cap Friendly, they've got Clefbaum on IR and they've got Sekera on IR.
And he's I think Clefbaum is just back now. I think he's going to be
back now, right?
Yeah, he's going to be back after the break.
They're still paying Spooner.
Yeah, they've
got buyout history with Pouliot for 2 more seasons.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like to rid yourself of Lucic next summer. It's going to be until 2029 that you'll be taking a cap hit.
It's so bad.
I'm going to elaborate on Peter
Lucic
said.
needs to develop blood clots or something.
Yeah. I'm going to elaborate what Peter said. When you're talking about the cap being ugly, the problem with the cap being ugly is there's nobody you could buy out.
Exactly.
Right? I looked at it, and there's nobody they could buy out.
It will be painful, but I think they will buy out Lucic simply because
he's too young. They can't do it.
So you wait another. You either convince him to basically go away like Joffrey Lupul.
He's not at that point yet, Mike. Right?
And that's the thing. It's like, so the only thing that you can do is now remember the deal was front loaded, so the cap hit won't be as much. It's 12. The remaining 4 years is 12 million. I think it's 18 million bucks. So it would be $12 million divided over 8 years, which I think is 1.5. So that's not ridiculous. The cap is going up more than that. But
it's like 4 or 5 more years. You can't let this guy will get another job the minute you buy him out. Like, they can't do that. That's not going to work for them.
Unless they find a team that's willing to take that contract down, like an Arizona contract. Right, exactly. That's why I'm saying.
But they'll take Lucic after you buy them out, and that's why they shouldn't buy him
out. They're gonna wait another year and wait for expansion and hope they lose Lucic in the expansion draft.
Well, they've got to hold on to expansion and hope they do that, and maybe they can appeal to the league for giving up 2 players. Like, it's
they're not going to do that, Peter.
We volunteered to give up 2.
Well, we're willing to give up 2. Now, wait,
the price of 1.
That'd be interesting. There is a neat idea. What if you could trade to avoid expansion drafts? So trade your thing to another team. What would that be worth?
All right, let's move off of this because we got about a half hour left, and I wanted to touch on the PHWA, which Russ and I are members and voted on. held their mid-season hockey awards vote, and it was. I think the first time was last year, and it was pretty interesting. It gave us an indicator of what the year-end awards are going to be. But we know that players will have good second halves, and some will drop off, and some won't. But the results came in. They were released by Frank Cervelli, Chris Johnston, and the hierarchy at the PHWA. And we're going to go through a few of them. We'll go through some tomorrow too. We'll have Kevin Allen on the show, and we'll do the show at 11 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. Starting out with the Hart Trophy, and the three leading vote getters, according to the voters, were Nikita Kucherov, Johnny Gaudreau, and Connor McDavid. And Connor McDavid is where I have the problem, because Edmonton is a disaster, and he is clearly the best player in the league. But how can you be the most valuable player to your team and be a team that is not even in the playoffs?
I mean, you can, like Andre Dawson did it in baseball, but you have to be so far and away, and he's not.
Right.
And so I didn't have him on my ballot either, but I watched the first two periods pretty intently last night for Toronto, Washington, and I felt like my first Hart Trophy nominee of Frederick Anderson was right on the money, because even though Washington ran out of gas because they were playing back-to-back, and they were running out of gas before that game, for those first couple, for that first period especially, Anderson had to face like ridiculous point-blank shots.
Yeah.
And he really – because Washington could have had a lead in that game, and maybe they could have held on, but Anderson made sure that wasn't going to happen. And Mike talks about it all the time. He's done that so many times this year.
Yeah.
That's why I think he could win the Hart and Vezina this year, or in my mind should.
Well, he covers up a lot of the Leafs' defensive ills, Peter. And I think he's a great goaltender, and I think he's, that was one of the better games the Leafs have played in January. That's how bad they played this month. But I'm one of those people, like, unless it's, he's having a great season. Unless it's a season like a Dominic Hasek or that Jose Theodore had a few years ago, I usually relegate the goaltender to the Vezina. I had Rantanen as my third choice. I had Kucherov, Gaudreau, and Rantanen, and
I had Gaudreau and Kucherov as my second and third.
Yeah. So, and are we missing anybody, or did the PHWA miss anybody? Or
no, I don't think so. I understand why people.
I think they missed on Anderson. I don't care that he's a goalie.
I'm a believer in Anderson for sure. I'm there. He needs to be in the conversation. I know there is discussion in debate about when it comes to Hart, the goalies have their own award, which is the Vezina, and there's people in the PWHA who believe that the goalie should only be eligible for the Vezina. I'm not there. I think in certain circumstances, like we see with Toronto right now, and there's going to be a lot of people who go, oh God, another Toronto fluffer, whatever. Freddie Anderson has been nothing short of insanely good this season.
Yep.
And I can't go, and if I had a vote, I would have him in my top three. And I might have him right with Russ where he is. I just don't understand a guy who's more valuable to his team than Freddie Anderson.
Well, let's talk about the Vezina, because I had voted for Anderson first, and overall he ended up third in the voting. John Gibson of Anaheim was first. Marc-Andre Fleury, who I voted for third, was second, and he's having an incredible year. He's playing almost every game, and
although he's selling his house. Should people in Vegas be worried about that?
Well, he signed an extension, so no. Why should he?
So he's just moving neighborhoods? Okay.
Maybe he's moving into a condo. He doesn't want to do the lawn. Maybe it's too close to the strip, something like that. But it was Gibson, Fleury, and Anderson 1, 2, 3 in the voting. Russ, I think Vasilevsky deserved to be in the top three, but maybe the fact that they didn't drop off significantly when Louis Domingue was in net was what limited his voting.
I do, and I love John Gibson, as you know. He didn't make my top three because I felt like he's been a little bit adrift from where he was a few weeks ago. But again, the whole team is. Right now, I had Anderson 1, Vasilevsky 2, and Leonard 3. Yeah. I think Leonard really should be in there because Leonard is the lead. Now, again, people could say goals against is a team thing. That's fine. But he's also up there in save percentage. He's Leonard really deserves it. Like without Robin Leonard, if Eck got his way and Thomas Greiss were the goalie, we would just be talking about it.
You just stole my line. I was going to say Eck had Greiss number one.
And I like Leonard as like a comeback player too. I mean,
we'll get to that.
Yeah, but I mean, Peter, do you think, because the other guys I considered were Pekka Rinne and Hellebuyck.
Right.
But you know, I thought of Gibson, but I thought because Anaheim at that point was out of the playoffs, I was sticking with the same thing. It's like, you know, how you could say they would be 31st overall if Gibson wasn't in goal, but I mean, they have to be in the playoffs to, I think, make the valuable part of that award be, you know, I think established. So I mean, did you think Rinne or anybody else deserved to be on that list?
I think you could give Rinne a little, you know, he's close, and I could understand why some would put him on there. You know, I think at the end of the year, it might be really interesting to see if Rittich gets some consideration.
Mm-hmm.
If
he continues,
you know, and you know, I think what I think is really interesting is Rittich is a little bit like he's taken over the number one. He's come out of nowhere, sort of when things went bad, and he could definitely, depending on how the second half of the season goes, get some consideration. I think you know, it's interesting. There's a few guys who are playing really well as backups, but don't have the games in.
Right.
What's his name? It's Campbell in LA, right?
Yep.
He's been playing really well. Brossoit in Winnipeg's been playing really well, but he only has 12 games. It's not enough to warrant consideration. Right. But there's an interesting dynamic there. Like if Connor Hellebuyck went down and Brossoit had to start the next 35 games, and he kept on. I don't think he can maintain his pace, but if he was in there, you have to start thinking about it. But the longevity of the season should play a big factor in this.
Got a chance for the Jennings. I do.
Yeah, that's true. Jennings, don't forget about the Jennings. Yeah,
we'll do a couple more, and then we'll save some for tomorrow. The Selke. I mean, Selke's always. I mean, right now it's sort of boring because you know Patrice Bergeron is going to win it because he's just so good. But it's always interesting to see who the second and third guys vote in the vote were. I had Bergeron, Couturier, and Logan Couture. The final voting was Bergeron, Alexander Barkov, and Mark Stone. Mark Stone does not strike me as and then that's a weird thing. Mark Stone is a winger, and usually the Selke are centers.
It doesn't have to be a center. I don't buy that, but I just think that's been happenstance. But I have Bergeron, Sebastian Aho, and Sean Couturier.
Yeah,
Sebastian Aho deserves a little bit of credit for the amazing season he's got. And he does go up against everybody.
Yeah,
Peter, I mean,
I agree.
I'm pretty sure that the last winger to win the Selke was Yuri Lettinen.
I think you're absolutely right. I'm almost certain that you're right.
He was a multiple-time winner. He won it.
Yeah, right. I mean, you know, Bob Gainey was the guy who they basically invented the award for. But it's like, I mean, so I bristle at the fact that a winger shouldn't win it, but it just seems that's why I'm a little surprised Stone, because Stone is a winger, that he's there. But you know, and Barkov's having a good year, but again, Florida is a disappointment this year, so that's why I picked Couturier and Couture. I mean, Philadelphia is not a playoff team, but Couturier is such a good defensive forward. Yeah. So,
you know who else I think I don't, and I'm going to go out on a weird tangent here on this, but someone I could see doing, because from what I've seen, just looking at numbers, and I haven't paid a ton of attention, I could be way off here, but someone I think we need to keep our eye on for this award is Kotkaniemi.
Yes, he was.
I think we've got a future guy who's going to come in.
Top three. That's the problem. Yeah.
Sorry?
He was in my thoughts, but he wasn't in my top three.
Yeah. but I think thinking about him is someone I think we're going to be talking about in the future with this.
Yeah, he's not quite there yet. Yeah.
And ironically, like he was like fifth, and they only wanted the top three, but he was like fifth on my rookie voting.
Yeah.
Calder. And we'll save the Calder for tomorrow, but
Let's do one more. Let's do the Langway, because I think the Langway is an interesting one. And so here's who I put down. And again, I think I'm different than most people, but I think I can justify my picks very easy.
Sure.
I had Scott Mayfield 1, Radko Gudas 2, Jordy Ben 3.
Okay. I went more. I mean, the guy who ended up being first in the voting, I had second, which was Matthias Ekholm of Nashville. He's a really good defensive defenseman, and has started to contribute offensively as well.
Yeah, I don't even care about offense. I think that's
what's the Langway for again?
What's that?
What's the Langway for again?
It's the defenseman who best excels in the defensive aspect of the game. Oh. So they had Ekholm. The voters had Ekholm 1, Mark Giordano 2, Victor Hedman 3. My votes, I had Ryan McDonough 1. Because Ryan McDonough is,
I think the reason I didn't, because he is too offensive.
Yeah, but not. I mean, so is Giordano. But the thing, it doesn't.
My point is, I'm picking guys that are strictly defensive first.
Right.
These guys that all made the list are not strictly defense first. They're not.
Right. Well, it's sort of like the Lady Byng, which is sort of like the consolation prize for the Hart.
Right, but I didn't want to make – this is my argument for this. I did not want to make this a consolation. I picked players that actually play hard defense, and that is their job. And then if they give offense, great. The other guys in that list are more offensive players. Yeah. The Norris is already littered with that.
We'll take some questions in the –
Hold on. What do you think, Peter?
He's away right now for camp. I wanted to ask him something about one of the guys I voted for, but I was just going to say, like, we're going to talk about the Bruins and their prospects and who they may be willing and not willing to trade at the deadline in a minute. But after that, we'll take a couple questions in the chat. Just to complete this, I had McDonough 1, Ekholm 2, and I had Jacob Trouba 3.
Yeah, I thought about putting Trouba, but he just missed it for me.
Yeah, I mean, right. I think he's, because he's not an offensive dynamo. He's more physical and more defensive minded, and I think that he sort of fits that. But now remember, this is not an official award, so this is not something that we'll be voting on at the end of the season. But the problem is that based on this, it's becoming sort of the Lady Byng of defensemen. And I think that's a failing. Now, Peter, just I want to get because I voted McDonough 1, Ekholm 2, and Trouba 3 for the Langway. So I mean, I think Trouba is one of the, he's not a big offensive guy, but I think defensively.
But the argument is, Peter, these are supposed to be defensive first players, and I think McDonough's tough. Trouba was on my thoughts, but I think the 3 that the PHWA took, nobody on that list is defense first.
Yeah. I think, it's funny.
Ekholm's not defense first. He's really not.
Okay.
I think the thing about guys, the Nashville group, is they come in and they just move the puck so fast up the ice. Like there's a transition aspect to the whole system that Lavi has them play in and everything. I think when it gets into doing things, I think Trouba needs to be in consideration for that. And I think the fact that he's on your radar that way really sort of emphasizes what Jacob Trouba is as a defenseman. Mm-hmm. He is this. This is where he excels. It's not offense. I think his agent would like to see him have more offense, but I think you're bang on with that. I think he deserves to be thought of for sure. I don't know if everyone's going to think of him that way. That could also be in the part of playing in Winnipeg, playing in the West, and not being seen as much. I mean, that's the other thing too.
Yeah, I'm going to fight here for Jordy Ben because I'm telling you, the Canadians would not be where they are without him.
True.
And we'll talk about this one tomorrow with Kevin, but I think the biggest joke of any vote of any of these things was the third place vote for GM of the year. Because let me just say, if signing Leo Komarov and Valtteri Filppula qualifies you for GM of the year. My God. Anyway.
No. Getting Barry Trotz qualifies.
Sure. And then if losing John Tavares qualifies you for GM of the year.
He had nothing to do with losing.
I did have him on my list, but he was third.
Okay. All right. Let's. No, this is the thing. We're gonna do this periodically between now and the deadline. We're gonna look at some of the teams that are buyers. And the thing is, with these teams, and Boston is the team that we're gonna look at today. They have, Boston has a large number of high-end prospects. But and when teams are talking to the Bruins, and there are rumors about them possibly being interested in Wayne Simmons or Furland, or the general consensus.
The media in Boston creates so many of these stories every year. They do.
Right, but the general consensus is that they're going to look for either an upgrade as a third line center or a second line winger that they need to add. They need to have something to sort of counter Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak to give them another line that teams worry about. And if that's the case, and Russ and I know their prospect base, and Peter I'm sure does as well, of the Bruins, there are players that they probably don't want to give up. Now, Russ, who are the three that you thought?
Well, I do want to say I'm going to look up the age of a player, and then I'll throw him in there. First, I want to get the obvious ones out of the way. I don't think Jacob Zaboral or Zach Senyshyn have any real value. They're not developed. They might still develop. They're 21. I don't think teams are asking for those guys at all. I think Boston is trying to push those guys, and I don't think anybody wants them. I think the guys everybody wants are Peter Chalarik, who came up recently and it just got sent back down for conditioning, Vakanainen, Anders Bork. I think those are players that people want. Like Anders Bork has 10 points in 13 games. You look up Zaboral and Senyshyn, and they're still, slogging along. Zaboral, I still would question whether his skating's even NHL quality. I saw him, last season and didn't feel like it was. So, but those guys, and maybe, and maybe a Jeremy Lawson, those guys, I think teams will ask for. I think Heinen, I don't even think you can get anymore. I think Boston needs him badly.
Or DeBrusk, or I don't think they're going to give up.
He's off the table. Like he's an untouchable.
Yeah,
he's an untouchable. So I think those are the other guys that they would be interested in. But I do want to mention, if they're looking for somebody, Sergei Samsonov is only 40, so they can get him back.
Well, okay. The funny thing is that up until this year, Stellarik was not really on their radar. He's 23, but he's had a really good year with Providence.
Yep.
He came up for 3 games, he scored 2 goals and an assist. So he's a big body. He's
got a great shot. He really does.
6'2", 202 pounds. So he's one of those late bloomers that they may value more than other teams value, but with the need for size and a guy who can skate with that size, he may tempt a number of teams. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, guys like Senyshyn and Zaboral, I don't even he's got 9 points in 27 games with Providence. Senyshyn is actually scoring at 12 goals with the in the AHL.
It's just not enough. Like, I don't think it's enough to tempt a team.
Yeah, but okay, and this is the thing, Peter. When you're looking for a guy a Michael Furland or a Simmons is probably going to necessitate either a first-round pick or a prospect that was drafted in the first round. Yeah. Zaboral and Senyshyn match that, but they haven't had success. I think that if one of those guys is part of those deals, it's going to be on top of a high draft pick. It's not going to be just them.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, this is the hard thing, right? Because it all depends on who the suitor is and their level of desperation or what they need. And, what do we normally hear? So we're coming into about 6 weeks now, and we start usually hearing, well, the prices are this, or the prices are high. We're hearing the prices are high. So now the bit of the PR war comes back and forth. And you start, and then the game starts beginning where, it goes back and forth. And I think sometimes every trade deadline, and we've all sat here for years looking at things, there's one or two deals where you go, wow, that's not quite as high as I thought it would be. Right. Mm-hmm. And then there's always a couple where you go, wow, they really paid a lot for that. And it really depends on, I think, the relationships the GMs have, and the suitors. Like if you're someone who you're not going to see, if you're both playoff teams, or you're not going to see unless you meet in the Stanley Cup final, you want to make sure you're not. That's probably a lesser cost to someone who could be there. So, yeah, I sort of agree with what you're saying, Mike. But we're going to have the dance soon.
Sure.
Dance of valuations publicly talked about. Darren Dreger's going to get up and say, well, all the prices are too high. Pierre LeBrun's going to write something for The Athletic, and everyone will call crawling out of the woodwork with their sort of sources of prices and stuff like that. And we'll go through that.
Let me change the direction of this. If I'm a team that's dumping a salary, then I think you'll get Zaboral or Senyshyn. But if I'm a team who has to go to my fan base and say, hey, this is who we got as young talent for a good player, then I think we're talking about these other players and not Zaboral and Senyshyn.
And here's where I think Boston has a lot of flexibility, because to Peter's point, it depends on who they're talking trade with. If it's a team that needs defense, they have two young defensemen in the NHL in Carlo and Grzelcyk. They're not going to trade McAvoy. He's a future superstar. They have Vakanainen, who's a first round pick, who's already played in the NHL, who's doing pretty well, did pretty well at the World Juniors, playing in the AHL. He's probably a guy they want to keep. But they have, Jeremy Lawson. They have
the guy they want to keep. I really think.
Well, maybe not. But he has value, is what I'm saying.
He has value, definitely.
Yes, and they also have a Jeremy Lawson. They have depth at defense. Organizationally, prospect wise, they have depth at forward. So teams that are looking for forwards may be interested in Forsbacka Karlsson or Bjork or Trent Frederick. They have a number of options.
Yeah.
Some other teams like Toronto, I don't think they want to trade Rasmus Sandin or trade Timothy Liljegren. I don't think Buffalo wants to trade Brendan Gooley. They have one or two defensive prospects and they want to keep those guys, and they're limited in that aspect. But in other areas, they're stronger. And then Boston, they have the flexibility to say, if you want a defenseman, okay. If you want a forward, okay.
Yeah. Believe it or not, though, Mike, Frederick seems to be an untouchable because the Rangers asked for him, and the other teams I think asked for him, and they couldn't get him.
I think part of the stuff with this, right, is you have to, like, Boston's, like, I haven't looked at them in a while in terms of their salary cap. They're fairly well managed, right? Like, there's not, will Chara come back for another year? Do they free up $5 million there? Like,
he'll come back.
Right. He'll come back probably. So they don't have a real cap problem yet. But when you're acquiring people, I think you also have to look at is if we're going to have future expenses, and the Leafs are in this. This is what sort of triggered the thought, Mike, was your point about the Leafs, was they've got solutions in-house rather than having to go spend money. They just need to be patient for it, because the value of those guys on their entry-level or second-level RFA deals,
right,
at that price point, is more valuable to the Leafs than screwing up with an acquisition and not having one of those guys.
Right. I mean, the
Boston's right sort of finessing that area too.
We'll talk about Toronto on a future show, but that's why, like, last night when I was watching the Leaf game and tracking the Marlies game at the same time, and Jeremy Bracco, who I really like as a player, who's at a point per game pace and has scored 4 goals in his last 5 games. As soon as I mentioned this, everybody was like, trade. Here's his trade value is going up. And I'm like, wait a second. He's got a year left on entry level, making less than $900,000 with no bonuses. That is more valuable to the Leafs when they have to pay Matthews and Marner and Kapanen and all these guys next year, because you've got a salary for under $1 million that might score you 45 to 50 points at the NHL level.
You can get 40. I think you can plug them in for 35, 40.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's not like, oh great, they're stacked on the right side. Well, the thing is that by you're gonna have to pay Matthews and Marner probably a total or maybe over $20 million a year. You need a guy who's making $800,000 to counterbalance that, and you need that guy more than you need a guy like Nylander making $7 million. So,
also, can we mention one thing again? Like I said, Boston is a lot of times is like La Presse in Montreal with these proposed deals. I always bring up La Presse because they're the gold standard of baloney in the NHL. What is really the odds that the Flyers, now that Bobby Clark and Holmgren are back in the mix, are really going to trade with the Bruins? What do you think and a player like Wayne Simmons that will go up against them, a certain amount of times a year? What do you think the odds of that really are happening are? 5%?
I think it's more because I don't think Simmons is going any place he's going to sign long term with. It's whoever. I think,
and they don't know that either.
Well, they don't know it, but it's going to be who gives them the best return.
This is Mark Streit. This is Wayne Simmons.
It's going to be
for the next few years.
It's going to be whoever gives them the best return. Toronto trade with Montreal.
I don't think they would trade with Boston. I really don't think it's going to happen.
Okay. All right, let's take a few questions in the chat.
Let's see.
And then, as I said earlier, tomorrow we will be doing a show at 11 a.m. Kevin Allen will be with us live from San Jose, so it'll be sunny while we're all freezing our asses off in the northeast.
That's all right.
And Manitoba.
Jonathan G brought up Doughty to the Islanders, but they don't have the pieces. They don't have guys. They don't have enough guys locked up, and they're not going to give up all their first rounders that they did last year to get Doughty. So I don't think they have the right pieces.
It would the first name that would be uttered from the lips of Rob Blake would be Matthew Barzal. And that's where it would probably end.
Yeah, and that's definitely where it would start. But even if they wanted, let's say they wanted Dobson, and let's say they wanted Wallstrom, then you could give them somebody else from the NHL roster, right? But they really would want Lee or Nelson, and they're UFAs. And so there's no, so they're not gonna trade a guy like Doughty without getting a big return like that back.
I mean, Josh Bailey is locked up, but
but that's not what. Yeah, Bailey is a step down from Tyler Toffoli. Like, what do you get?
You want a star forward and a young star forward for
someone who's playing right away, like not somebody who's years away.
Right, exactly.
All right.
I mean, while Russ is looking up that. Another question. I don't foresee, unless the Kings go into the crapper for another couple of years, them trading Drew Doughty because.
No, I don't either.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, he has complete control I think he has complete control right now because he signed the extension. He's got a no move clause, so he's not going to go anywhere unless he wants to go.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, I think, the Kings are going to field a ton of offers on Muzzin. Everyone's going to be calling, and they will take a look at it, but Doughty's not going anywhere.
By the way, I'm still scrolling through. Somebody had mentioned throwing Corey Schneider in a trade. He was part of a 7-5 loss in the AHL yesterday.
Yeah, and LA and
Corey Schneider has the yips.
It's close to closing time for him.
And Blake has already set the market for Muzzin. It's a first round pick and a prospect, and I think probably they're gonna get it based on. I wrote about this yesterday because Kyle Dubas came out and said he'd be interested in maybe dipping into the rental market, as opposed to like a month ago when he said he wasn't. Who the hell is out there? There's nobody out there in the rental market. If you're looking for a defenseman, the best option might be Bouwmeester or Kronwall. I mean,
I know it's brutal.
There's like 3 questions. We'll get to them.
Okay.
Look, if Muzzin was a right shot D, he's a Leaf right now.
And he's got right, but Elliot Friedman basically said if they didn't find a right shot option, that they would go after Muzzin because they can move Riley to the right side or Dermott to the right side and accommodate it. But that's not what Babcock wanted. Babcock, remember, he had a defensive.
Hang on, my time's limited. Sorry, I got to
go. Sorry.
So Mike Doyle asked Russ, "Why do you think Crosby never gets consideration for the Selke?" He's in consideration for so many awards. I do think he gets overlooked. We all do it.
Yeah,
I think it's just really,
that's a totally fair thing.
Yeah.
Crosby's so good in so many ways that you could give him everything.
You could. Michael G, I'm going to call him because I really don't know how to pronounce his last name. Simmons, Nashville for Fiala and Bitetto.
Oh, Anthony Potato.
Oh, Anthony Potato. Yeah. I think you're talking. I think that's actually a possibility. I think Laviolette would throw the jelly into the wall and see what the jelly says. I think that's possible.
What? I don't know what that reference is.
Oh, he that's the thing with Lavi. You have to know Lavi. He did that when he was with the Flyers. He threw a jar of jelly against the wall once.
Okay.
Adam Ziller, can the Sabres trade an Okposo or Nylander to help with the playoff push? I don't think Nylander has great value. He has some value. Okposo, I don't think you could trade the contract. So I don't think either one of that is really an option because Alex Nylander is not having a good year. Let's just
if somebody liked Alex Nylander and that was the price that they were asking for somebody, I think the Sabres would oblige because he was a Tim Murray draft pick and he hasn't done anything great since being drafted. So I think they would accommodate that, but he doesn't. He's a great right now. He's a grade B asset, not a grade A.
Scott C, who has a better chance at a wild card, Vancouver or St. Louis? I mean, if it's the St. Louis Cardinals, then I'm with you.
Vancouver, but I don't think either one of them are.
Neither. And Jerkball, could the Leafs trade?
Great name, Jerkball.
Well, he did TO, so at least he knows. It's good for the market. Could the Leafs trade guards for? And I guess that's guard for more than what it costs to acquire Muzzin.
No,
they can't trade Gardner, so it doesn't matter. They can't.
They won't trade Gardner.
No.
It doesn't make sense for LA to take Gardner on because he's going to test.
No. I think they're saying two separate deals. Trade Gardner to get a first and something, and then trade that to get Muzzin.
You're gonna do the exact same thing they did with JVR last year, and
he's an own rental. He's an own rental. Just like Tyler Myers, they're both going to be own rentals. The Leafs will go out and get another defenseman before the deadline, and that guy will have a year or so left in the contract, and he will be the Gardner replacement when Gardner leaves.
Yeah. All right, I got to run, guys.
Okay, good show, guys. We'll be back.
Have a good one.
We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Russ Cohen, for Peter Tessier, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.